Highbridge Audio presents Beowulf, translated and read by Seamus Heaney.
So, the Spear Danes in days gone by, and the kings who ruled them, had courage and greatness. We have heard of those princes' heroic campaigns. There was Shield Sheafson, scourge of many tribes, a wrecker of mead benches, rampaging among foes. This terror of the hall troops had come far. A foundling to start with, he would flourish later on as his powers waxed and his worth was proved. In the end, each clan on the outlying coasts beyond the whale road had to yield to him and begin to pay tribute. That was one good king. Afterwards, a boy-child was born to Shield, a cub in the yard, a comfort sent by God to that nation. He knew what they had tholed, the long times and troubles they'd come through without a leader. So the Lord of Life, the glorious Almighty, made this man renowned. Shield had fathered a famous son. Beow's name was known through the north. And a young prince must be prudent like that, giving freely while his father lives, so that afterwards in age, when fighting starts, steadfast companions will stand by him and hold the line. Behaviour that's admired is the path to power among people everywhere. Shield was still thriving when his time came, and he crossed over into the Lord's keeping. His warrior band did what he bade them when he laid down the law among the Danes. They shouldered him out to the sea's flood, the chief they revered, who had long ruled them. A ring-whirled prow rode in the harbour, ice-clad, outbound, a craft for a prince. They stretched their beloved lord in his boat, laid out by the mast, amidships, the great ring-giver. Far-fetched treasures were piled upon him, and precious gear. I never heard before of a ship so well furbished with battle tackle, bladed weapons, and coats of mail. The mast treasure was loaded on top of him. It would travel far, on out into the ocean's sway. They decked his body no less bountifully with offerings than those first ones did, who cast him away when he was a child and launched him alone out over the waves. And they set a gold standard up high above his head and let him drift to wind and tide, bewailing him and mourning their loss. No man can tell. No wise man in hall or weathered veteran knows for certain who salvaged that load. Then it fell to Bew to keep the forts. He was well regarded and ruled the Danes for a long time after his father took leave of his life on earth. And then his heir, the great Half-Dane, held sway for as long as he lived, their elder and warlord. He was 4 times a father, this fighter prince. One by one they entered the world, Herogar, Hrothgar, the good Halga, and a daughter I have heard, who was Onala's queen, a balm in bed for the battle-scarred Swede. The fortunes of war favoured Hrothgar. Friends and kinsmen flocked to his ranks, young followers, a force that grew to be a mighty army. So his mind turned to hall building. He handed down orders for men to work on a great mead hall, meant to be a wonder of the world forever. It would be his throne room, and there he would dispense his God-given goods to young and old, but not the common land or people's lives. Far and wide through the world, I have heard, orders for work to adorn that wallstead were sent to many peoples, and soon it stood there, finished and ready, in full view, the Hall of Halls. Heorot was the name he had settled on it, whose utterance was law. Nor did he renege, but doled out rings and torques at the table. The hall towered, its gables wide and high, and awaiting a barbarous burning. That doom abided, but in time it would come. The killer instinct unleashed among in-laws, the bloodlust rampant. Then a powerful demon, a prowler through the dark, nursed a hard grievance. It harrowed him to hear the din of the loud banquet every day in the hall, the harp being struck, and the clear song of a skilled poet telling with mastery of man's beginnings, how the Almighty had made the earth a gleaming plain girdled with waters. In his splendour he set the sun and the moon to be earth's lamplight, lanterns for men, and filled the broad lap of the world with branches and leaves, and quickened life in every other thing that moved. So times were pleasant for the people there, until finally one, a fiend out of hell, began to work his evil in the world. Grendel was the name of this grim demon, haunting the marches, marauding round the heath and the desolate fens. He had dwelt for a time in misery among the banished monsters, Cain's clan, whom the Creator had outlawed and condemned as outcasts. For the killing of Abel, the eternal Lord had exacted a price. Cain got no good from committing that murder, because the Almighty made him anathema, and out of the curse of his exile there sprang ogres and elves and evil phantoms, and giants too, who strove with God time and again until he gave them their reward. So, after nightfall, Grendel set out for the lofty house to see how the ring-danes were settling into it after their drink. And there he came upon them, a company of the best, asleep from their feasting, insensible to pain and human sorrow. Suddenly then the god-cursed brute was creating havoc. Greedy and grim, he grabbed 30 men from their resting places and rushed to his lair, flushed up and inflamed from the raid, blundering back with the butchered corpses. Then, as dawn brightened and the day broke, Grendel's powers of destruction were plain. Their wassail was over. They wept to heaven and mourned under mourning. Their mighty prince, the storied leader, sat stricken and helpless, humiliated by the loss of his guard, bewildered and stunned, staring aghast at the demon's trail, in deep distress. He was numb with grief, but got no respite, for one night later merciless Grendel struck again with more gruesome murders. Malignant by nature, he never showed remorse. It was easy then to meet with a man shifting himself to a safer distance to bed in the bothies, for who could be blind to the evidence of his eyes, the obviousness of the hall-watcher's hate? Whoever escaped kept a weather eye open and moved away. So Grendel ruled in defiance of right, one against all, until the greatest house in the world stood empty, a deserted wallstead. For 12 winters, seasons of woe, the Lord of the Shieldings suffered under his load of sorrow. And so, before long, the news was known over the whole world. Sad lays were sung about the beset king, the vicious raids and ravages of Grendel, his long and unrelenting feud, nothing but war, how he would never parley or make peace with any Dane, nor stop his death-dealing, nor pay the death price. No counsellor could ever expect fair reparation from those rabid hands. All were endangered. Young and old were hunted down by that dark death shadow, who lurked and swooped in the long nights on the misty moors. Nobody knows where these reavers from hell roam on their errands. So Grendel waged his lonely war, inflicting constant cruelties on the people, atrocious hurt. He took over Heorot, haunted the glittering hall after dark. But the throne itself, the treasure seat, he was kept from approaching. He was the Lord's outcast. These were hard times, heartbreaking for the Prince of the Shieldings. Powerful counsellors, the highest in the land, would lend advice. plotting how best the bold defenders might resist and beat off sudden attacks. Sometimes at pagan shrines they vowed offerings to idols, swore oaths that the killer of souls would come to their aid and save the people. That was their way, their heathenish hope. Deep in their hearts they remembered hell. The Almighty Judge of good deeds and bad, the Lord God, head of the heavens and high King of the world, was unknown to them. Oh, cursed is he who in time of trouble has to thrust his soul in the fire's embrace, forfeiting help. He has nowhere to turn. But blessed is he who after death can approach the Lord and find friendship in the Father's embrace. So that troubled time continued, woe that never stopped, steady affliction for Halfdane's son, too hard an ordeal. There was panic after dark. People endured rage in the night, riven by the terror. When he heard about Grendel, Hygelac's Thane was on home ground, over in Geatland. There was no one else like him alive. In his day he was the mightiest man on earth, high-born and powerful. He ordered a boat that would ply the waves. He announced his plan to sail the Swan's Road and search out that king, the famous prince who needed defenders. Nobody tried to keep him from going. No elder denied him, dear as he was to them. Instead, they inspected omens and spurred his ambition to go, whilst he moved about like the leader he was, enlisting men, the best he could find. With 14 others, the warrior boarded the boat as captain, a canny pilot along coast and currents. Time went by. The boat was on water, in close under the cliffs. Men climbed eagerly up the gangplank. Sand churned in surf. Warriors loaded a cargo of weapons, shining war gear in the vessel's hold, then heaved out, away with a will in their wood-wreathed ship. Over the waves, with the wind behind her and foam at her neck, she flew like a bird, until her curved prow had covered the distance, and on the following day, at the due hour, those seafarers sighted land, sunlit cliffs, sheer crags and looming headlands, the landfall they sought. It was the end of their voyage, and the Geats vaulted over the side, out onto the sand, and moored their ship. There was a clash of mail and a thresh of gear. They thanked God for that easy crossing on a calm sea. When the watchman on the wall, the shielding's lookout, whose job it was to guard the sea cliffs, saw shields glittering on the gangplank and battle equipment being unloaded, he had to find out who and what the arrivals were. So he rode to the shore, this horseman of Hrothgar's, and challenged them in formal terms, flourishing his spear. "What kind of men are you who arrive rigged out for combat in coats of mail, sailing here over the sea lanes in your steep-hulled boat? I have been stationed as lookout on this coast for a long time. My job is to watch the waves for raiders, any danger to the Danish shore. Never before has a force under arms disembarked so openly, not bothering to ask if the sentries allowed them safe passage or the clan had consented. Nor have I seen a mightier man-at-arms on this earth than the one standing here. Unless I am mistaken, he is truly noble. This is no mere hanger-on in a hero's armour. So now, before you fare inland as interlopers, I have to be informed about who you are and where you hail from. Outsiders from across the water, I say it again. The sooner you tell where you come from and why, the better." The leader of the troop unlocked his word hoard. The distinguished one delivered this answer: "We belong by birth to the Geat people, and owe allegiance to Lord Hygelac. In his day my father was a famous man, a noble warrior lord named Ecgtheow. He outlasted many a long winter and went on his way. All over the world, men wise in counsel continue to remember him. We come in good faith to find your lord and nation's shield, the son of Halfdane. Give us the right advice and direction. We have arrived here on a great errand to the Lord of the Danes, and I believe, therefore, there should be nothing hidden or withheld between us. So tell us if what we have heard is true about this threat, whatever it is, this danger abroad in the dark nights, this corpse-maker mongering death in the shielding country. I come to proffer my wholehearted help and counsel. I can show the wise Hrothgar a way to defeat his enemy and find respite, if any respite is to reach him ever. I can calm the turmoil and terror in his mind. Otherwise he must endure woes and live with grief for as long as his hall stands at the horizon on its high ground. Undaunted, sitting astride his horse, the coast guard answered, Anyone with gumption and a sharp mind will take the measure of two things, what's said and what's done. I believe what you have told me, that you are a troop loyal to our king. So come ahead with your arms and your gear, and I will guide you. What's more, I'll order my own comrades on their word of honour to watch your boat down there on the strand. Keep her safe in her fresh tower, until the time comes for her curved prow to preen on the waves and bear this hero back to Geatland. May one so valiant and so venturesome come unharmed through the clash of battle. So they went on their way. The ship rode the water, broad-beamed, bound by its hawser and anchored fast. Boar shapes flashed above their cheek guards, the brightly forged work of goldsmiths, watching over those stern-faced men. They marched in step, hurrying on till the timbered hall rose before them, radiant with gold. Nobody on earth knew of another building like it. Majesty lodged there. Its light shone over many lands. So their gallant escort guided them to that dazzling stronghold and indicated the shortest way to it. Then the noble warrior wheeled on his horse and spoke these words. It is time for me to go. May the Almighty Father keep you and in his kindness watch over your exploits. I'm away to the sea, back on alert against enemy raiders. It was a paved track, a path that kept them in marching order. Their mail shirts glinted, hard and hand-linked. The high-gloss iron of their armour rang. So they duly arrived in their grim war graith and gear at the hall, and weary from the sea, stacked wide shields of the toughest hardwood against the wall, then collapsed on the benches. Battle dress and weapons clashed. They collected their spears in a seafarer's stook, a stand of greyish, tapering ash, and the troops themselves were as good as their weapons. Then a proud warrior questioned the men concerning their origins. Where do you come from, carrying these decorated shields and shirts of mail, these cheek-hinged helmets and javelins? I am Hrothgar's herald and officer. I have never seen so impressive or large an assembly of strangers. Stoutness of heart, bravery, not banishment, must have brought you to Hrothgar. The man whose name was known for courage, the Geat leader, resolute in his helmet, answered in return. We are retainers from Higelac's band. Beowulf is my name. If your lord and master, the most renowned son of Halfdane, will hear me out and graciously allow me to greet him in person, I am ready and willing to report my errand. Wulfgar replied, a Wendel chief renowned as a warrior, well known for his wisdom and the temper of his mind. I will take this message in accordance with your wish to our noble king." With that he turned to where Hrothgar sat. Wulfgar addressed his dear lord. "People from Geatland have put ashore. They have sailed far over the wide sea. They call the chief in charge of their band by the name of Beowulf. They beg, my lord, an audience with you, exchange of words and formal greeting. Most gracious Hrothgar, do not refuse them, but grant them a reply. From their arms and appointment they appear well-born and worthy of respect, especially the one who has led them this far. He is formidable indeed." Hrothgar, protector of Shieldings, replied, "I used to know him when he was a young boy. His father before him was called Ecgtheow. A crew of seamen who sailed for me once with a gift cargo across to Geatland returned with marvellous tales about him. A thane, they declared, with the strength of 30 in the grip of each hand. Now holy God has in his goodness guided him here to the West Danes to defend us from Grendel. This is my hope, and for his heroism I will recompense him with a rich treasure. Go immediately, bid him and the Geats he has in attendance to assemble and enter." At the door of the hall, Wulfgar duly delivered the message. "My lord, the conquering king of the Danes, bids me announce that he knows your ancestry, also that he welcomes you here to Heorot, and salutes your arrival from across the sea. You are free now to move forward to meet Hrothgar in helmets and armour." The hero arose, surrounded closely by his powerful thanes. A party remained under orders to keep watch on the arms. The rest proceeded, led by their prince under Heorot's roof. And standing on the hearth, in webbed links that the smith had woven, the fine forged mesh of his gleaming mail shirt, resolute in his helmet, Beowulf spoke. "Greetings to Hrothgar. I am Healak's kinsman, one of his hall troop. When I was younger, I had great triumphs. Then news of Grendel, hard to ignore, reached me at home. Sailors brought stories of the plight you suffer in this legendary hall, how it lies deserted, empty and useless once the evening light hides itself under heaven's dome. So every elder and experienced councilman among my people supported my resolve to come here to you, King Hrothgar, because all knew of my awesome strength. And so my request, O King of bright Danes, dear Prince of the Shieldings, friend of the people and their ring of defence, my one request is that you won't refuse me, who have come this far, the privilege of purifying Heorot, with my own men to help me, and nobody else. I have heard, moreover, that the monster scorns in his reckless way the use of weapons. Therefore, to heighten Healak's fame and gladden his heart, I hereby renounce sword and the shelter of the broad shield, the heavy war board. Hand to hand is how it will be, a life and death fight with the fiend. Whichever one death fells must deem it a just judgment by God. Fate goes ever as fate must." Hrothgar, the helmet of Shieldings, spoke. "Beowulf, my friend, you have travelled here to favour us with help and to fight for us. My household guard are on the wane. Fate sweeps them away into Grendel's clutches. But God can easily halt these raids and harrowing attacks. Now take your place at the table. Relish the triumph of heroes to your heart's content." Then a bench was cleared in that banquet hall, so the Geats could have room to be together, and the party sat, proud in their bearing, strong and stalwart. An attendant stood by with a decorated pitcher, pouring bright helpings of mead. And the minstrel sang, filling Heorot with his head-clearing voice, gladdening that great rally of Geats and Danes. Then the grey-haired treasure-giver was glad. Far famed in battle, the prince of bright Danes and keeper of his people counted on Beowulf, on the warrior's steadfastness and his word. So the laughter started, the din got louder, and the crowd was happy. Wealhtheow came in, Hrothgar's queen, observing the courtesies. Adorned in her gold, she graciously saluted the men in hall, then handed the cup to all ranks, treating the household and the assembled troop, until it was Beowulf's turn to take it from her hand. With measured words she welcomed the Geat, and thanked God for granting her wish that a deliverer she could believe in would arrive to ease their afflictions. He accepted the cup, a daunting man, dangerous in action and eager for it always. He addressed Wealhtheow. Beowulf, the son of Ecgtheow, declared, "I had a fixed purpose when I put to sea. As I sat in the boat with my band of men, I meant to perform to the uttermost what your people wanted, or perish in the attempt, in the fiend's clutches. And I shall fulfill that purpose, prove myself with a proud deed, or meet my death here in the mead hall." This formal boast by Beowulf the Geat pleased the lady well, and she went to sit by Hrothgar, regal and arrayed with gold. Then it was like old times in the echoing hall, proud talk and the people happy, loud and excited, until soon enough Halfdane's heir had to be away to his night's rest. He realized that the demon was going to descend on the hall, that he had plotted all day, from dawnlight until darkness gathered again over the world, and stealthy night shapes came stealing forth under the cloud murk. The company stood as the two leaders took leave of each other. Hrothgar wished Beowulf health and good luck, named him hall warden, and announced as follows: "Never, since my hand could hold a shield, have I entrusted or given control of the Danes' hall to anyone but you. Ward and guard it, for it is the greatest of houses. Be on your mettle now. Keep in mind your fame. Beware of the enemy. There's nothing you wish for that won't be yours if you win through alive." Hrothgar departed then with his houseguard. The lord of the Shieldings, their shelter in war, left the mead hall to lie with Wealhtheow, his queen and his bedmate. The king of heaven, as people learned, had posted a lookout who was a match for Grendel, a guard against monsters, special protection to the Danish prince. The Geat placed complete trust in his strength of limb and the Lord's favour. He began to remove his iron breastmail, took off the helmet, and handed his attendant the patterned sword, a smith's masterpiece, ordering him to keep the equipment guarded. And before he bedded down, Beowulf, that prince of goodness, proudly asserted, "When it comes to fighting, I count myself as dangerous any day as Grendel, so it won't be a cutting edge I'll wield to mow him down, easily as I might. He has no idea of the arts of war, of shield or sword play, although he does possess a wild strength. No weapons, therefore, for either this night. Unarmed he shall face me, if face me he dares. And may the divine Lord in his wisdom grant the glory of victory to whichever side he sees fit." Then down the brave man lay, with his bolster under his head, and his whole company of sea rovers at rest beside him. None of them expected he would ever see his homeland again, or get back to his native place and the people who reared him. They knew too well the way it was before, how often the Danes had fallen prey to death in the mead hall. But the Lord was weaving a victory on his war loom for the weather geats. Through the strength of one, they all prevailed. They would crush their enemy and come through in triumph and gladness. The truth is clear. Almighty God rules over mankind and always has. Then out of the night came the shadow stalker, stealthy and swift. The hall guards were slack, asleep at their posts, all except one. It was widely understood that as long as the Lord forbade it, the fiend could never bear them beyond his shadow bourne. One man, however, was in fighting mood, awake and on edge, spoiling for action. In off the moors, down through the mist bands, God-cursed Grendel came greedily loping. The bane of the race of men roamed forth, hunting for a prey in the high hall. Under the cloud murk he moved towards it until it shone above him, a sheer keep of fortified gold. Nor was that the first time he had scouted the grounds of Hrothgar's dwelling, although never in his life, before or since, did he find harder fortune or hall defenders. Spurned and joyless, he journeyed on ahead and arrived at the bawn. The iron-braced door turned on its hinge when his hands touched it. Then his rage boiled over. He ripped open the mouth of the building, maddening for blood, pacing the length of the patterned floor with his loathsome tread, while a baleful light, flame more than light, flared from his eyes. He saw many men in the mansion, sleeping, a ranked company of kinsmen and warriors quartered together. And his glee was demonic, picturing the mayhem. Before morning he would rip life from limb and devour them, feed on their flesh. But his fate that night was due to change. His days of ravening had come to an end. Mighty and canny, Higelac's kinsman was keenly watching for the first move the monster would make. Nor did the creature keep him waiting, but struck suddenly and started in. He grabbed and mauled a man on his bench, bit into his bone lappings, bolted down his blood, and gorged on him in lumps, leaving the body utterly lifeless, eaten up hand and foot. Venturing closer, his talon was raised to attack Beowulf where he lay on the bed. He was bearing in with open claw when the alert hero's comeback and arm-lock forestalled him utterly. The captain of evil discovered himself in a hand-grip harder than anything he had ever encountered in any man on the face of the earth. Every bone in his body quailed and recoiled, but he could not escape. He was desperate to flee to his den and hide with the devil's litter, for in all his days he had never been clamped or cornered like this. Then Higelac's trusty retainer recalled his bedtime speech, sprang to his feet and got a firm hold. Fingers were bursting, the monster backtracking, the man overpowering. The dread of the land was desperate to escape, to take a roundabout road and flee to his lair in the fens. The latching power in his fingers weakened. It was the worst trip the terror-monger had taken to Heorot. And now the timbers trembled and sang, a hall session that harrowed every Dane inside the stockade. Stumbling in fury, the two contenders crashed through the building. The hall clattered and hammered, but somehow survived the onslaught and kept standing. It was handsomely structured, a sturdy frame, braced with the best of blacksmith's work inside and out. The story goes that as the pair struggled, mead benches were smashed and sprung off the floor, gold fittings and all. Before then, no shielding elder would believe there was any power or person upon earth capable of wrecking their horn-rigged hall, unless the burning embrace of a fire engulf it in flame. Then an extraordinary wail arose, and bewildering fear came over the Danes. Everyone felt it who heard that cry as it echoed off the wall, a God-cursed scream and strain of catastrophe, the howl of the loser, the lament of the hell serf keening his wound. He was overwhelmed, manacled tight, by the man who of all men was foremost and strongest in the days of this life. But the Earl troop's leader was not inclined to allow his caller to depart alive. He did not consider that life of much account to anyone anywhere. Time and again, Beowulf's warriors worked to defend their lord's life, laying about them as best they could with ancestral blades. Stalwart in action, they kept striking out on every side, seeking to cut straight to the soul. When they joined the struggle, there was something they could not have known at the time, that no blade on earth, no blacksmith's art could ever damage their demon opponent. He had conjured the harm from the cutting edge of every weapon. But his going away out of this world and the days of his life would be agony to him, and his alien spirit would travel far into the fiend's keeping. Then he who had harrowed the hearts of men with pain and affliction in former times, and given offence also to God, found that his bodily powers failed him. Higelac's kinsman kept him helplessly locked in a hand-grip. As long as either lived, he was hateful to the other. The monster's whole body was in pain. A tremendous wound appeared on his shoulder. Sinews split and bone lappings burst. Beowulf was granted the glory of winning. Grendel was driven under the fen banks, fatally hurt, to his desolate lair. His days were numbered. The end of his life was coming over him. He knew it for certain. And one bloody clash had fulfilled the dearest wishes of the Danes. The man who had lately landed among them, proud and sure, had purged the hall, kept it from harm. He was happy with his night work and the courage he had shown. The Geat captain had boldly fulfilled his boast to the Danes. He had healed and relieved a huge distress, unremitting humiliations, the hard fate they had been forced to undergo, no small affliction. Clear proof of this could be seen in the hand the hero displayed high up near the roof, the whole of Grendel's shoulder and arm, his awesome grasp. Then morning came, and many a warrior gathered, as I've heard, around the gift hall, clan chiefs flocking from far and near down wide-ranging roads, wondering greatly at the monster's footprints. His fatal departure was regretted by no one who witnessed his trail, the ignominious marks of his flight, where he'd skulked away, exhausted in spirit and beaten in battle, bloodying the path, hauling his doom to the demon's mere. The bloodshot water wallowed and surged. There were loathsome upthrows and overturnings of waves and gore and wound slurry. With his death upon him, he had dived deep into his marsh den, drowned out his life and his heathen soul. Hell claimed him there. Then away they rode, the old retainers, with many a young man following after, a troop on horseback, in high spirits on their bay steeds. Beowulf's doings were praised over and over again. Nowhere, they said, north or south, between the two seas, or under the tall sky, on the broad earth, was there anyone better to raise a shield or to rule a kingdom. Yet there was no laying of blame on their lord, the noble Hrothgar. He was a good king. At times the war band broke into a gallop, letting their chestnut horses race wherever they found the going good on those well-known tracks. Meanwhile, a thane of the king's household, a carrier of tales, a traditional singer deeply schooled in the lore of the past, linked a new theme to a strict metre. The man started to recite with skill, rehearsing Beowulf's triumphs and feats in well-fashioned lines, entwining his words. The light of day broke and kept brightening. Bands of retainers galloped in excitement to the gabled hall to see the marvel. And the king himself, guardian of the ring hoard, goodness in person, walked in majesty from the women's quarters with a numerous train, attended by his queen and her crowd of maidens, across to the mead hall. When Hrothgar arrived at the hall, he spoke, standing on the steps under the steep eaves, gazing at the roofwork and Grendel's talon. First and foremost, let the Almighty Father be thanked for this sight. I suffered a long harrowing by Grendel, but the heavenly shepherd can work his wonders always and everywhere. Not long since, it seemed I would never be granted the slightest solace or relief from any of my burdens. The best of houses glittered and reeked and ran with blood. This one worry outweighed all others, a constant distress to counsellors entrusted with defending the people's forts from assault by monsters and demons. But now a man, with the Lord's assistance, has accomplished something none of us could manage before now for all our efforts. Whoever she was who brought forth this flower of manhood, if she is still alive, that woman can say that in her labours the Lord of ages bestowed a grace on her. So now, Beowulf, I adopt you in my heart as a dear son. Nourish and maintain this new connection, you noblest of men. There'll be nothing you'll want for, no worldly goods that won't be yours. I have often honoured smaller achievements, recognized warriors not nearly as worthy, lavished rewards on the less deserving. But you have made yourself immortal by your glorious action. May the God of ages continue to keep and requite you well. Then Halfdane's son presented Beowulf with a gold standard as a victory gift, an embroidered banner, also breastmail and a helmet, and a sword carried high that was both precious object and token of honour. So Beowulf drank his drink at ease. It was hardly a shame to be showered with such gifts in front of the hall troops. There haven't been many moments, I am sure, when men exchanged 4 such treasures at so friendly a sitting. An embossed ridge, a band lapped with wire, arched over the helmet, head protection to keep the keen-honed cutting edge from damaging it when danger threatened and the man was battling behind his shield. Next the king ordered 8 horses with gold bridles to be brought through the yard into the hall. The harness of one included a saddle of sumptuous design, the battle seat where the son of Halfdane rode when he wished to join the swordplay. Wherever the killing and carnage were the worst, he would be to the fore, fighting hard. Then the Danish prince, descendant of Ing, handed over both the arms and the horses, urging Beowulf to use them well. And so their leader, the lord and guard of coffer and strongroom, with customary grace, bestowed upon Beowulf both sets of gifts. A fair witness can see how well each one behaved. The chieftain went on to reward the others. Each man on the bench who had sailed with Beowulf and risked the voyage received a bounty, some treasured possession. And compensation, a price in gold, was settled for the Geat Grendel had cruelly killed earlier, as he would have killed more, had not mindful God and one man's daring prevented that doom. Past and present, God's will prevails. Hence, understanding is always best, and a prudent mind. Whoever remains for long here in this earthly life will enjoy and endure more than enough. They sang then and played to please the hero, words and music for their warrior prince, harp tunes and tales of adventure. There were high times on the hall benches, and the king's poet performed his part with the saga of Finn and his sons, unfolding the tale of that fierce attack in Friesland, when Hnaf, king of the Danes, met death, and his sister Hildebur suffered cruelly. Son and brother, she lost them both on the battlefield. They foredoomed, cut down and spear-gored, she in shock, waylaid by grief, Hawk's daughter. How could she not lament her fate when morning came and the light broke on her murdered dears? And so farewell, delight on earth. War carried away Finn's troop of thanes, all but a few. How then could Finn hold the line, or fight on to the end with Hengest? How save the rump of his force from that enemy chief? So a truce was offered as follows. First, separate quarters to be cleared for the Danes, hall and throne to be shared with the Frisians. Then, second, every day at the dole-out of gifts, Finn, son of Folkwald, would honour the Danes, bestow with an even hand to Hengest and Hengest's men the wrought gold rings, bounty to match the measure he gave his own Frisians, to keep morale in the beer hall high. Both sides then sealed their agreement. With oaths to Hengest, Finn swore, openly, solemnly, that the battle survivors would be guaranteed honour and status. No infringement by word or deed, no provocation would be permitted. Their own ring-giver was dead and gone. They were leaderless, enforced allegiance to his murderer. A funeral pyre was then prepared, effulgent gold brought out from the hoard. The pride and prince of the Shieldings lay awaiting the flame. Everywhere there were blood-plastered coats of mail. The pyre was heaped with boar-shaped helmets forged in gold, with the gashed corpses of well-born Danes. Many had fallen. Then Hildebur ordered her own son's body to be burnt with Hnaf's, the flesh on his bones to sputter and blaze beside his uncle's. The woman wailed and sang keens. The warrior went up. Carcass flame swirled and fumed. They stood round the burial mound and howled as heads melted. Crusted gashes spattered and ran bloody matter. The glutton element flamed and consumed the dead of both sides. Their great days were gone. Warriors scattered to homes and forts all over Friesland. Fewer now, feeling loss of friends. Hengist stayed, lived out that whole resentful, blood-sullen winter with Finn, homesick and helpless. No ring-whirled prow could up then and away on the sea. Wind and water raged with storms. Wave and shingle were shackled in ice. Until another year appeared in the yard, as it does to this day, the seasons constant, the wonder of light coming over us. Then winter was gone. Earth's lap grew lovely. Longing woke in the cooped-up exile for a voyage home, but more for vengeance, some way of bringing things to a head. His sword arm hankered to greet the Dutes. Thus blood was spilled, the gallant Finn slain in his home. The wildness in them had to brim over. The hall ran red with blood of enemies, Finn was cut down, the queen brought away, and everything the shieldings could find inside Finn's walls, the Frisian king's gold collars and gemstones, swept off to the ship. Over sea lanes then, back to Daneland, the warrior troop bore that lady home. The poem was over. The poet had performed. A pleasant murmur started on the benches. Stewards did the rounds with wine in splendid jugs. The queen spoke to Hrothgar. "Enjoy this drink, most generous lord. Raise up your goblet, entertain the Geats duly and gently, discourse with them, be open-handed, happy and fond. Relish their company, but recollect as well all of the boons that have been bestowed on you. The bright court of Heorot has been cleansed, and now the word is that you want to adopt this warrior as a son. So, while you may, bask in your fortune, and then bequeath kingdom and nation to your kith and kin." She turned then to the bench where her boys sat, all the youth together, and that good man, Beowulf the Geat, sat between the brothers. The cup was carried to him, kind words spoken in welcome, and a wealth of gold given to the hero. 2 arm bangles, a mail shirt and rings, and the most resplendent torque of gold I ever heard tell of anywhere on earth or under heaven. Then the queen pronounced in the presence of the company, "Take delight in this torque, dear Beowulf. Wear it for luck, and wear also this mail from our people's armoury. May you prosper in them. Be acclaimed for strength, for kindly guidance to these 2 boys, and your bounty will be sure. You have won renown. You are known to all men, far and near, now and forever. Your sway is wide as the wind's home, as the sea around cliffs. And so, my prince, I wish you a lifetime's luck and blessings to enjoy this treasure. Treat my sons with tender care. Be strong and kind. Here each comrade is true to the other, loyal to lord, loving in spirit. The thanes have one purpose. The people are ready. Having drunk and pledged, the ranks do as I bid." She moved then to her place. Men were drinking wine at that rare feast. How could they know fate, the grim shape of things to come, the threat looming over many thanes as night approached and King Hrothgar prepared to retire to his quarters? Retainers in great numbers were posted on guard as so often in the past. Benches were pushed back, bedding gear and bolsters spread across the floor, and one man lay down to his rest, already marked for death. At their heads they placed their polished timber battle shields, and on the bench over them each man's kit was kept to hand, a towering war helmet, webbed mail shirt, and great shafted spear. It was their habit always and everywhere to be ready for action, at home or in the camp, in whatever case and at whatever time the need arose to rally round their lord. They were a right people. They went to sleep, and one paid dearly for his night's ease, as had happened to them often ever since Grendel occupied the Gold Hall, committing evil until the end came, death after his crimes. Then it became clear, obvious to everyone once the fight was over, that an avenger lurked and was still alive, grimly biding time. Grendel's mother, monstrous hell-bride, brooded on her wrongs. She had been forced down into fearful waters, the cold depths, after Cain had killed his father's son, felled his own brother with a sword. Branded an outlaw, marked by having murdered, he moved into the wilds, shunned company and joy. and from Cain there sprang misbegotten spirits, among them Grendel, the banished and accursed. But now his mother had sallied forth on a savage journey, grief-racked and ravenous, desperate for revenge. She came to Heorot. There, inside the hall, Danes lay asleep, earls who would soon know a great reversal, once Grendel's mother attacked and entered. Then in the hall, hard-honed blades were grabbed from the bench, many a broad shield lifted and braced. There was little thought of helmets or woven mail when they woke in terror. The hell dam was in panic, desperate to get out, in mortal terror the moment she was found. She had pounced and taken one of the retainers in a tight hold, then headed for the fen. To Hrothgar, this man was the most beloved of the friends he trusted between the two seas. She had done away with a great warrior, ambushed him at rest. Beowulf was elsewhere. Earlier, after the award of the treasure, the Geat had been given another lodging. There was uproar in Heorot. She had snatched their trophy, Grendel's bloodied hand. It was a fresh blow to the afflicted bawn. The bargain was hard, both parties having to pay with the lives of friends. And the old lord, the grey-haired warrior, was heart-sore and weary when he heard the news. His highest-placed adviser, his dearest companion, was dead and gone. Beowulf was quickly brought to the chamber. The winner of fights, the arch-warrior, came first-footing in with his fellow troops to where the king in his wisdom waited, still wondering whether Almighty God would ever turn the tide of his misfortunes. So Beowulf entered with his band in attendance, and the wooden floorboards banged and rang as he advanced, hurrying to address the Prince of the Ingwins, asking if he'd rested, since the urgent summons had come as a surprise. Then Hrothgar, the shielding's helmet, spoke. Rest. What is rest? Sorrow has returned. Alas for the Danes. Eshere is dead. He was Irminlaf's elder brother and a soulmate to me, a true mentor, my right-hand man when the ranks clashed and our boar-crests had to take a battering in the line of action. Eshere was everything the world admires in a wise man and a friend. Then this roaming killer came in a fury and slaughtered him in Heorot. Where she is hiding, glutting on the corpse and glorying in her escape, I cannot tell. She has taken up the feud because of last night when you killed Grendel, wrestled and racked him in ruinous combat, since for too long he had terrorized us with his depredations. He died in battle, paid with his life, and now this powerful other one arrives, this force for evil, driven to avenge her kinsman's death. I have heard it said by my people in Hall, counsellors who live in the upland country, that they have seen two such creatures prowling the moors, huge marauders from some other world. One of these things, as far as anyone can ever discern, looks like a woman. The other, warped in the shape of a man, moves beyond the pale, bigger than any man, an unnatural birth called Grendel by the country people in former days. They are fatherless creatures, and their whole ancestry is hidden in a past of demons and ghosts. They dwell apart among wolves on the hills, on wind-swept crags and treacherous caches, where cold streams pour down the mountain and disappear under mist and moorland. A few miles from here, a frost-stiffened wood waits and keeps watch above a mere. The overhanging bank is a maze of tree roots mirrored in its surface. At night there, something uncanny happens. The water burns, and the mere bottom has never been sounded by the sons of men. On its bank the heather stepper halts. The hart in flight from pursuing hounds will turn to face them with firm-set horns and die in the wood rather than dive beneath its surface. That is no good place. When wind blows up and stormy weather makes clouds scud and the skies weep, out of its depths a dirty surge is pitched towards the heavens. Now help depends again on you, and on you alone. The gap of danger where the demon waits is still unknown to you. Seek it if you dare. I will compensate you for settling the feud as I did the last time with lavish wealth, coffers of coiled gold, if you come back. Beowulf, the son of Ecgtheow, spoke. Wise sir, do not grieve. It is always better to avenge dear ones than to indulge in mourning. For every one of us, living in this world means waiting for our end. Let whoever can win glory before death. When a warrior is gone, that will be his best and only bulwark. So arise, my lord, and let us immediately set forth on the trail of this troll dam. I guarantee you she will not get away, not to dens underground, nor upland groves, nor the ocean floor. She'll have nowhere to flee to. Endure your troubles today. Bear up, and be the man I expect you to be. With that, the old lord sprang to his feet and praised God for Beowulf's pledge. Then a bit and halter were brought for his horse with the plaited mane. The wise king mounted the royal saddle and rode out in style with a force of shield-bearers. The forest paths were marked all over with the monster's tracks, her trail on the ground wherever she had gone across the dark moors, dragging away the body of that thane, Hrothgar's best counsellor and overseer of the country. So the noble prince proceeded undismayed, up fells and screes, along narrow footpaths, and ways where they were forced into single file, ledges on cliffs above lairs of water monsters. He went in front with a few men, good judges of the lie of the land, and suddenly discovered the dismal wood, mountain trees growing out at an angle above grey stones. The bloodshot water surged underneath. It was a sore blow to all of the Danes, friends of the Shieldings, a hurt to each and every one of that noble company when they came upon Asheri's head at the foot of the cliff. Everybody gazed as the hot gore kept wallowing up and an urgent war horn repeated its notes. The whole party sat down to watch. The water was infested with all kinds of reptiles. There were writhing sea dragons and monsters slouching on slopes by the cliff, serpents and wild things such as those that often surface at dawn to roam the sail road and doom the voyage. Down they plunged, lashing in anger at the loud call of the battle bugle. An arrow from the bow of the Geat chief got one of them as he surged to the surface. The seasoned shaft went in deep, and his freedom in the water got less and less. It was his last swim. He was swiftly overwhelmed in the shallows, prodded by barbed boar spears, cornered, beaten, pulled up on the bank. A strange lake birth, a loathsome catch men gazed at in awe. Beowulf got ready, donned his war gear, indifferent to death. His mighty, hand-forged, fine-webbed mail would soon meet with the menace under water. It would keep the bone cage of his body safe. No enemy's clasp could crush him in it, no vicious arm-lock choke his life out. To guard his head, he had a glittering helmet that was due to be muddied on the mere bottom and blurred in the upswirl. It was of beaten gold, princely headgear, hooped and hasped by a weaponsmith who had worked wonders in days gone by and embellished it with boar shapes. Since then it had resisted every sword. And another item, lent by Unferth at that moment, was of no small importance. The Brehon handed him a hilted weapon, a rare and ancient sword named Hrunting. The iron blade with its ill-boding patterns had been tempered in blood. It had never failed the hand of anyone who hefted it in battle, anyone who had fought and faced the worst in the gap of danger. This was not the first time it had been called to perform heroic feats. Beowulf, son of Ecgtheow, spoke. Wisest of kings, now that I have come to the point of action, I ask you to recall what we said earlier, that you, son of Halfdane and gold friend to retainers, that you, if I should fall and suffer death while serving in your cause, would act like a father to me afterwards. If this combat kills me, take care of my young company, my comrades in arms. And be sure also, my beloved Hrothgar, to send Healach the treasures I received. Let the Lord of the Geats gaze on that gold. Let Hrethel's son take note of it, and see that I found a ring-giver of rare magnificence, and enjoyed the good of his generosity. And Unferth is to have what I inherited. To that far-famed man I bequeath my own sharp-honed, wave-sheened wonder-blade. With Hrunting I shall gain glory or die.
Highbridge Audio presents Beowulf, translated and read by Seamus Heaney.
After these words, the Prince of the Weathergeats was impatient to be away, and plunged suddenly. Without further ado, he dived into the heaving depths of the lake. It was the best part of a day before he could see the solid bottom. The hero observed that swamp thing from hell, the Tarnhag, in all her terrible strength, then heaved his war sword and swung his arm. The decorated blade came down ringing and singing on her head. But he soon found his battle torch extinguished. The shining blade refused to bite. It spared her and failed the man in his need. It had gone through many hand-to-hand fights, had hewed the armour and helmets of the doomed, but here at last the fabulous powers of that heirloom failed. Healach's kinsman kept thinking about his name and fame. He never lost heart. Then, in a fury, he flung his sword away. The keen inlaid, worm-loop-patterned steel was hurled to the ground. He would have to rely on the might of his arm. So must a man do who intends to gain enduring glory in a combat. Life doesn't cost him a thought. Then the Prince of the Wargeats, warming to this fight with Grendel's mother, gripped her shoulder and laid about him in a battle frenzy. He pitched his killer opponent to the floor, but she rose quickly and retaliated, grappled him tightly in her grim embrace. The sure-footed fighter felt suddenly daunted. The strongest of warriors stumbled and fell. So she pounced upon him and pulled out a broad, whetted knife. Now she would avenge her only child. But the mesh of the chain mail on Beowulf's shoulder shielded his life, turned the edge and tip of the blade. The son of Ecgtheow would surely have perished, and the Geats lost their warrior under the wide earth, had the strong links and locks of his war gear not helped to save him. Holy God decided the victory. It was easy for the Lord, the ruler of heaven, to redress the balance once Beowulf got back on his feet. Then he saw a blade that boded well, a sword in her armoury, an ancient heirloom from the days of the giants, an ideal weapon, one that any warrior would envy, but so huge and heavy of itself only Beowulf could wield it in a battle. So the Shieldings hero, hard-pressed and enraged, took a firm hold of the hilt and swung the blade in an arc, a resolute blow that bit deep into her neck bone and severed it entirely, toppling the doomed house of her flesh. She fell to the floor. The sword dripped blood. The swordsman was elated. The seafarer's leader made for land, resolutely swimming, delighted with his prize, the mighty load he was lugging to the surface. His thanes advanced in a troop to meet him, thanking God and taking great delight in seeing their prince back safe and sound. Quickly the hero's helmet and mail shirt were loosed and unlaced. The lake settled. Clouds darkened above the bloodshot depths. With high hearts they headed away along footpaths and trails through the fields, roads that they knew, each of them wrestling with the head they were carrying from the lakeside cliff, men kingly in their courage and capable of difficult work. It was a task for 4 to hoist Grendel's head on a spear and bear it under a strain to the bright hall. Beowulf, son of Ecgtheow, spoke. So, son of Halfdane, prince of the Shieldings, we are glad to bring this booty from the lake. It is a token of triumph, and we tender it to you. I barely survived the battle under water. It was hard fought, a desperate affair that could have gone badly. If God had not helped me, the outcome would have been quick and fatal. I have wrested the hilt from the enemy's hand, avenged the evil done to the Danes. It is what was due. And this I pledge, O Prince of the Shieldings. You can sleep secure with your company of troops in Heorot Hall. Never need you fear for a single thane of your sept or nation, young warriors or old, that laying waste of life you and your people endured of yore. Then the golden hilt was handed over to the old lord, a relic from long ago for the venerable ruler. That rare smithwork was passed on to the prince of the Danes when those devils perished. Once death removed that murdering, guilt-steeped, god-cursed fiend, eliminating his unholy life and his mother's as well, it was willed to that king, who of all the lavish gift lords of the north was the best regarded between the 2 seas. And soon all was restored, the same as before. Happiness came back, the hall was thronged, and a banquet set forth. Black night fell and covered them in darkness. Then the company rose for the old campaigner. The grey-haired prince was ready for bed, and a need for rest came over the brave shield-bearing Geat. He was a weary seafarer far from home, so immediately a house-guard guided him out, one whose office entailed looking after whatever a thane on the road in those days might need or require. It was noble courtesy. That great heart rested. The hall towered, gold-shingled and gabled, and the guests slept in it, until the black raven with raucous glee announced heaven's joy, and a hurry of brightness overran the shadows. Warriors rose quickly, impatient to be off. Their own country was beckoning the nobles, and the bold voyager longed to be aboard his distant boat. Then that stalwart fighter ordered Hrunting to be brought to Unferth, and bade Unferth take the sword and thanked him for lending it. He said he had found it a friend in battle and a powerful help. He put no blame on the blade's cutting edge. He was a considerate man. And there the warriors stood in their war gear, eager to go, while their honoured lord approached the platform where the other sat. The undaunted hero addressed Hrothgar. Beowulf, son of Ecgtheow, spoke. Now we who crossed the wide sea have to inform you that we feel a desire to return to Higelac. Here we have been welcomed and thoroughly entertained. You have treated us well. If there is any favour on earth I can perform beyond the deeds of arms I have done already, anything that would merit your affections more, I shall act, my lord, with alacrity. If ever I hear from across the ocean that people on your borders are threatening battle, as attackers have done from time to time, I shall land with 1,000 thanes at my back to help your cause. Higelac may be young to rule a nation, but this much I know about the king of the Geats. He will come to my aid and want to support me by word and action in your hour of need, when honour dictates that I raise a hedge of spears around you. Then, if Hrethric should think about travelling as a king's son to the court of the Geats, he will find many friends. Foreign places yield more to one who is himself worth meeting. Hrothgar spoke and answered him. The Lord in his wisdom sent you those words, and they came from the heart. I have never heard so young a man make truer observations. You are strong in body and mature in mind, impressive in speech. If it should come to pass that Hrethel's descendant dies beneath a spear, if deadly battle or the sword blade or disease fells the prince who guards your people, and you are still alive, then I firmly believe the seafaring Geats won't find a man worthier of acclaim as their king and defender than you, if only you would undertake the lordship of your homeland. My liking for you deepens with time, dear Beowulf. What you have done is to draw two peoples, the Geat nation and us neighbouring Danes, into shared peace and a pact of friendship, in spite of hatreds we have harboured in the past. For as long as I rule this far-flung land, treasures will change hands, and each side will treat the other with gifts. Across the gannet's bath, over the broad sea, whirled prows will bring presents and tokens. I know your people are beyond reproach in every respect, steadfast in the old way with friend or foe. Then the Earl's defender furnished the hero with 12 treasures and told him to set out, to sail with those gifts safely home to the people he loved, but to return promptly. And so the good and grey-haired Dane, that high-born king, kissed Beowulf and embraced his neck, then broke down in sudden tears. Two forebodings disturbed him in his wisdom, but one was stronger. Never more would they meet each other face to face, and such was his affection that he could not help being overcome. His fondness for the man was so deep-founded, it warmed his heart and wound the heartstrings tight in his breast. The embrace ended, and Beowulf, glorious in his gold regalia, stepped the green earth. Straining at anchor and ready for boarding, his boat awaited him. So they went on their journey, and Hrothgar's generosity was praised repeatedly. He was a peerless king, until old age sapped his strength and did him mortal harm, as it has done so many. Down to the waves then, dressed in the web of their chainmail and war-shirts, those young men marched in high spirits. The coastguard spied them, Thane setting forth, the same as before. His salute this time from the top of the cliff was far from unmannerly. He galloped to meet them, and as they took ship in their shining gear, he said how welcome they would be in Geatland. Then the broad hull was beached on the sand, to be cargoed with treasure, horses, and war gear. The curved prow motioned. The mast stood high above Hrothgar's riches in the loaded hold. The guard who had watched the boat was given a sword with gold fittings, and in future days that present would make him a respected man at his place on the mead bench. Then the keel plunged and shook in the sea, and they sailed from Denmark. Right away the mast was rigged with its sea shawl, sail ropes were tightened, timbers drummed, and stiff winds kept the wave-crosser skimming ahead. As she heaved forward, her foamy neck was fleet and buoyant, a lapped prow loping over currents, until finally the Geats caught sight of coastline and familiar cliffs. The keel reared up, wind lifted it home, it hit on the land. The harbour guard came hurrying out to the rolling water. He had watched the offing long and hard, on the lookout for those friends. With the anchor cables he moored their craft right where it had beached, in case a backwash might catch the hull and carry it away. Then he ordered the prince's treasure trove to be carried ashore. It was a short step from there to where Rethel's son and heir, Hygelac the gold-giver, makes his home on a secure cliff in the company of retainers. Heroic Beowulf and his band of men crossed the wide strand, striding along the sandy foreshore. The sun shone. The world's candle warmed them from the south as they hastened to where, as they had heard, the young king, Ongentheow's killer and his people's protector, was dispensing rings inside his bawn. Beowulf's return was reported to Hygelac as soon as possible. News that the captain was now in the enclosure, his battle brother back from the fray, alive and well, walking to the hall. Room was quickly made on the king's orders, and the troops filed across the cleared floor. After Hygelac had offered greetings to his loyal thane in lofty speech, he and his kinsman, that hale survivor, sat face to face. Heoreth's daughter moved about with the mead jug in her hand, taking care of the company, filling the cups that warriors held out. Then Hygelac began to put courteous questions to his old comrade in the high hall. He hankered to know every tale the sea Geats had to tell. "How did you fare on your foreign voyage, dear Beowulf, when you abruptly decided to sail away across the salt water and fight at Heorot? Did you help Hrothgar much in the end? Could you ease the prince of his well-known troubles? Your undertaking cast my spirits down. I dreaded the outcome of your expedition and pleaded with you long and hard to leave the killer be. Let the South Danes settle their own blood feud with Grendel. So God be thanked, I am granted this sight of you, safe and sound." Beowulf, son of Ecgtheow, spoke. "What happened, Lord Hygelac, is hardly a secret any more among men in this world. Myself and Grendel coming to grips on the very spot where he had visited destruction on the victory shieldings and violated life and limb. Losses I avenged, so no earthly offspring of Grendel's need ever boast of that bout before dawn, no matter how long the last of his evil family survives. When I first landed, I proceeded to the ring hall and saluted Hrothgar. Once he discovered why I had come, the son of Halfdane sent me immediately to sit with his own sons on the bench. It was a happy gathering. In my whole life I have never seen mead enjoyed more in any hall on earth. Sometimes the queen herself appeared, peace pledge between nations, to hearten the young ones, and hand out a torque to a warrior, then take her place. Sometimes Hrothgar's daughter distributed ale to older ranks, in order on the benches. I heard the company call her Freyawaru, as she made her rounds, presenting men with the gem-studded bowl, young bride-to-be to the gracious Ingeld, in her gold-trimmed attire. The friend of the Shieldings favours her betrothal. The guardian of the kingdom sees good in it, and hopes this woman will heal old wounds and grievous feuds. But generally the spear is prompt to retaliate when a prince is killed, no matter how admirable the bride may be. Think how the Heathobards will be bound to feel, their lord Ingeld and his loyal thanes, when he walks in with that woman to the feast. Danes are at the table, being entertained, honoured guests in glittering regalia, burnished ring-mail that was their host's birthright, looted when the Heathobards could no longer wield their weapons in the shield clash, when they went down with their beloved comrades and forfeited their lives. Then an old spearman will speak while they are drinking, having glimpsed some heirloom that brings alive memories of the massacre. His mood will darken, and heart-stricken in the stress of emotion, he will begin to test a young man's temper and stir up trouble, starting like this. "Now, my friend, don't you recognize your father's sword, his favourite weapon, the one he wore when he went out in his war mask to face the Danes on that final day? After Weathergeld died and his men were doomed, the Shieldings quickly claimed the field. And now here's a son of one or other of those same killers coming through our hall, overbearing us, mouthing boasts, and rigged in armour that by right is yours." And so he keeps on, recalling and accusing, working things up with bitter words, until one of the lady's retainers lies spattered in blood, split open on his father's account. The killer knows the lie of the land and escapes with his life. Then, on both sides, the oath-bound lords will break the peace. A passionate hate will build up in Ingeld, and love for his bride will falter in him as the feud rankles. I therefore suspect the good faith of the Heathobards, the truth of their friendship, and the trustworthiness of their alliance with the Danes. But now, my lord, I shall carry on with my account of Grendel, the whole story of everything that happened in the hand-to-hand fight. After heaven's gem had gone mildly to earth, that maddened spirit, the terror of those twilights, came to attack us where we stood guard, still safe inside the hall. Their deadly violence came down on Hantshio, and he fell as fate ordained, the first to perish, rigged out for the combat. A comrade from our ranks had come to grief in Grendel's maw. He ate up the entire body. There was blood on his teeth. He was bloated and dangerous, all roused up, yet still unready to leave the hall empty-handed. Renowned for his might, he matched himself against me, wildly reaching. He had this roomy pouch, a strange accoutrement, intricately strung and hung at the ready, a rare patchwork of devilishly fitted dragon skins. I had done him no wrong, yet the raging demon wanted to cram me and many another into this bag. But it was not to be, once I got to my feet in a blind fury. It would take too long to tell how I repaid the terror of the land for every life he took, and so won credit for you, my king, and for all your people. And although he got away to enjoy life's sweetness for a while longer, his right hand stayed behind him in Heorot, evidence of his miserable overthrow as he dived into murk on the mere bottom. I got lavish rewards from the Lord of the Danes for my part in the battle, beaten gold and much else, once morning came and we took our places at the banquet table. There was singing and excitement. An old reciter, a carrier of stories, recalled the early days. At times some hero made the timbered harp tremble with sweetness, or related true and tragic happenings. At times the king gave the proper turn to some fantastic tale, or a battle-scarred veteran, bowed with age, would begin to remember the martial deeds of his youth and prime, and be overcome as the past welled up in his wintry heart. We were happy there the whole day long, and enjoyed our time until another night descended upon us. Then, with sudden dispatch, the vehement mother avenged her son and wreaked destruction. Death had robbed her. Geats had slain Grendel. So his ghastly dam struck back and with barefaced defiance laid a man low. Thus life departed from the sage Ashuri, an elder wise in counsel. But afterwards, on the morning following, the Danes could not burn the dead body, nor lay the remains of the man they loved on his funeral pyre. She had fled with the corpse and taken refuge beneath torrents on the mountain. It was a hard blow for Hrothgar to bear, harder than any he had undergone before. And so the heart-sore king beseeched me in your royal name to take my chances under water, to win glory and prove my worth. He promised me rewards. Hence, as is well known, I went to my encounter with the terror-monger at the bottom of the tarn. For a while it was hand to hand between us. Then blood went curling along the currents, and I beheaded Grendel's mother in the hall with a mighty sword. I barely managed to escape with my life. My time had not yet come. But Halfdane's heir, the shelter of those earls, again endowed me with a multitude of gifts. Thus the king acted with due custom. I was paid and recompensed completely, given full measure and the freedom to choose from Hrothgar's treasures by Hrothgar himself. These, King Hygelac, I am happy to present to you as gifts. It is still upon your grace that all favour depends. I have few kinsmen who are close, my king, except for your kind self. Then he ordered the boar-framed standard to be brought, the battle-topping helmet, the mail shirt, grey as hoarfrost, and the precious war-sword. I heard 4 horses were handed over next. Beowulf bestowed 4 bay steeds to go with the armour, swift gallopers, all alike. So ought a kinsman act, instead of plotting and planning in secret to bring people to grief, or conspiring to arrange the death of comrades. The warrior king was uncle to Beowulf, and honoured by his nephew. Each was concerned for the other's good. I heard he presented Hygd with a gorget, the priceless torque that the prince's daughter Wealhtheow had given him, and 3 horses, supple creatures, brilliantly saddled. The bright necklace would be luminous on Hygd's breast. Thus Beowulf bore himself with valour. He was formidable in battle, yet behaved with honour and took no advantage, never cut down a comrade who was drunk, kept his temper, and warrior that he was, watched and controlled his God-sent strength and his outstanding natural powers. He had been poorly regarded for a long time, was taken by the Geats for less than he was worth, and their lord, too, had never much esteemed him in the mead hall. They firmly believed that he lacked force, that the prince was a weakling. But presently, every affront to his deserving was reversed. The battle-famed king, bulwark of his earls, ordered a gold-chased heirloom of Hrethel's to be brought in. It was the best example of a gem-studded sword in the Geat treasury. This he laid on Beowulf's lap, and rewarded him with land as well, 7,000 hides, and a hall and a throne. Both owned land by birth in that country, ancestral grounds, but the greater right and sway were inherited by the higher born. A lot was to happen in later days in the fury of battle. Higelac fell, and the shelter of Herdred's shield proved useless against the fierce aggression of the Shieldfings. Ruthless swordsmen, seasoned campaigners, they came against him and his conquering nation, and with cruel force cut him down, so that afterwards the wide kingdom reverted to Beowulf. He ruled it well for 50 winters, grew old and wise as warden of the land, until one began to dominate the dark, a dragon on the prowl from the steep vaults of a stone-roofed barrow where he guarded a hoard. There was a hidden passage unknown to men, but someone managed to enter by it and interfere with the heathen trove. He handled and removed a gem-studded goblet. It gained him nothing, though with a thief's wiles he had outwitted the sleeping dragon. That drove him into rage, as the people of that country would soon discover. The intruder who broached the dragon's treasure and moved him to wrath had never meant to. It was desperation on the part of a slave fleeing the heavy hand of some master, guilt-ridden and on the run, going to ground. But he soon began to shake with terror. In shock, the wretch panicked and ran away with the precious metalwork. There were many other heirlooms heaped inside the earth house, because long ago, with deliberate care, some forgotten person had deposited the whole rich inheritance of a high-born race in that ancient cache. Death had come and taken them all in times gone by, and the one surviving witness of their fate, the last veteran, could envisage only the same fate for himself. He foresaw that his joy in the treasure would be brief. A newly constructed barrow stood waiting on a wide headland close to the waves, its entryway secured. Into it the keeper of the hoard had carried all the goods and golden ware worth preserving. His words were few. Now, earth, hold what earls once held, and heroes can no more. It was mined from you first by honourable men. My own people have been ruined in war. One by one they went down to death, looked their last on sweet life in the hall. I am left with nobody to bear a sword or burnish plated goblets, put a sheen on the cup. The companies have departed. The hard helmet, hasped with gold, will be stripped of its hoops, and the helmet shiner, who should polish the metal of the war mask, sleeps. The coat of mail that came through all fights, through shield collapse and cut of sword, decays with the warrior. Nor may webbed mail range far and wide on the warlord's back beside his mustered troops. No trembling harp, no tuned timbre, no tumbling hawk swerving through the hall, no swift horse pawing the courtyard. Pillage and slaughter have emptied the earth of entire peoples. And so he mourned as he moved about the world, deserted and alone, lamenting his unhappiness day and night, until death's flood brimmed up in his heart. Then an old harrower of the dark happened to find the hoard open, the burning one who hunts out barrows, the slick-skinned dragon threatening the night sky with streamers of fire. People on the farms are in dread of him. He is driven to hunt out hoards underground, to guard heathen gold through age-long vigils, though to little avail. For 3 centuries this scourge of the people had stood guard on that stoutly protected underground treasury, until the intruder unleashed its fury. He hurried to his lord with the gold-plated cup and made his plea to be reinstated. Then the vault was rifled, the ring hoard robbed, and the wretched man had his request granted. his master gazed on that find from the past for the first time. When the dragon awoke, trouble flared again. He rippled down the rock, writhing with anger, when he saw the footprints of the prowler who had stolen too close to his dreaming head. So may a man not marked by fate easily escape exile and woe by the grace of God. The hoard guardian scorched the ground as he scoured and hunted for the trespasser who had troubled his sleep. Hot and savage, he kept circling and circling the outside of the mound. No man appeared in that desert waste, but he worked himself up by imagining battle. Then back in he'd go in search of the cup, only to discover signs that someone had stumbled upon the golden treasures. So the guardian of the mound, the hoard watcher, waited for the gloaming with fierce impatience. His pent-up fury at the loss of the vessel made him long to hit back and lash out in flames. Then, to his delight, the day waned, and he could wait no longer behind the wall, but hurtled forth in a fiery blaze. The first to suffer were the people on the land, but before long it was their treasure-giver who would come to grief. The dragon began to belch out flames and burn bright homesteads. There was a hot glow that scared everyone, for the vile sky-winger would leave nothing alive in his wake. Everywhere the havoc he wrought was in evidence. Far and near, the Geat nation bore the brunt of his brutal assaults and virulent hate. Then back to the hoard he would dart before daybreak to hide in his den. He had swinged the land, swathed it in flame, in fire and burning, and now he felt secure in the vaults of his barrow. But his trust was unavailing. Then Beowulf was given bad news, a hard truth. His own home, the best of buildings, had been burnt to a cinder, the throne-room of the Geats. It threw the hero into deep anguish and darkened his mood. The wise man thought he must have thwarted ancient ordinance of the eternal Lord, broken his commandment. His mind was in turmoil. Unaccustomed anxiety and gloom confused his brain. The fire dragon had razed the coastal region and reduced forts and earthworks to dust and ashes. So the war king planned and plotted his revenge. The warrior's protector, prince of the hall troop, ordered a marvellous all-iron shield from his smithy works. He well knew that linden boards would let him down and timber burn. After many trials, he was destined to face the end of his days in this mortal world, as was the dragon, for all his long leasehold on the treasure. The veteran king sat down on the cliff-top. He wished good luck to the Geats who had shared his hearth and his gold. He was sad at heart, unsettled yet ready, sensing his death. His fate hovered near, unknowable but certain. It would soon claim his coffered soul, part life from limb. Before long, the prince's spirit would spin free from his body. Beowulf spoke, made a formal boast for the last time. I risked my life often when I was young. Now I am old, but as king of the people, I shall pursue this fight for the glory of winning, if the evil one will abandon his fort and face me in the open. Then he addressed each dear companion one final time, those fighters in their helmets, resolute and high-born. I would rather not use a weapon if I knew another way to grapple with the dragon and make good my boast as I did against Grendel in days gone by. But I shall be meeting molten venom in the fire he breathes, so I go forth in mail shirt and shield. I won't shift a foot when I meet the cave guard. What occurs on the wall between the two of us will turn out as fate, overseer of men, decides. I am resolved. I scorn further words against this sky-born foe. Men at arms, remain here on the barrow, safe in your armour, to see which one of us is better in the end at bearing wounds in a deadly fray. This fight is not yours, nor is it up to any man except me to measure his strength against the monster or to prove his worth. I shall win the gold by my courage, or else mortal combat, doom of battle, will bear your lord away." Then he drew himself up beside his shield. The fabled warrior in his war shirt and helmet trusted in his own strength entirely and went under the crag. No coward path. Hard by the rock face, that hale veteran, a good man who had gone repeatedly into combat in danger and come through, saw a stone arch and a gushing stream that burst from the barrow, blazing and wafting a deadly heat. It would be hard to survive unscathed near the horde, to hold firm against the dragon in those flaming depths. Then he gave a shout. The Lord of the Geats unburdened his breast and broke out in a storm of anger. Under the grey stone his voice challenged and resounded clearly. Hate was ignited. The horde guard recognized a human voice. The time was over for peace and parleying. Pouring forth in a hot battle fume, the breath of the monster burst from the rock. There was a rumble underground. Down there in the barrow, Beowulf the warrior lifted his shield. The outlandish thing writhed and convulsed and vehemently turned on the king, whose keen-edged sword, an heirloom inherited by ancient right, was already in his hand. Roused to a fury, each antagonist struck terror in the other. Unyielding, the lord of his people loomed by his tall shield, sure of his ground, while the serpent looped and unleashed itself. Swaddled in flames, it came gliding and flexing and racing towards its fate. Yet his shield defended the renowned leader's life and limb for a shorter time than he meant it to. That final day was the first time when Beowulf fought and fate denied him glory in battle. So the king of the Geats raised his hand and struck hard at the enamelled scales, but scarcely cut through. The blade flashed and slashed, yet the blow was far less powerful than the hard-pressed king had need of at that moment. The mound keeper went into a spasm and spouted deadly flames. When he felt the stroke, battle fire billowed and spewed. Beowulf was foiled of a glorious victory. The glittering sword, infallible before that day, failed when he unsheathed it, as it never should have. For the son of Ecgtheow, it was no easy thing to have to give ground like that and go unwillingly to inhabit another home in a place beyond. So every man must yield the leasehold of his days. Sad at heart, addressing his companions, Wiglaf spoke wise and fluent words. I remember that time when mead was flowing, how we pledged loyalty to our lord in the hall, promised our ring-giver we would be worth our price, make good the gift of the war gear, these swords and helmets, as and when his need required it. Now the day has come when this Lord we serve needs sound men to give him their support. Let us go to him, help our leader through the hot flame and dread of the fire. As God is my witness, I would rather my body were robed in the same burning blaze as my gold-giver's body than go back home bearing arms. That is unthinkable, unless we have first slain the foe and defended the life of the Prince of the Weathergeats. I well know the things he has done for us deserve better. Why should he alone be left exposed to fall in battle? We must bond together, shield and helmet, mail shirt and sword. Then he waded the dangerous reek and went under arms to his lord, saying only, "Go on, dear Beowulf, do everything you said you would when you were still young, and vowed you would never let your name and fame be dimmed while you lived. Your deeds are famous, so stay resolute, my lord. Defend your life now with the whole of your strength. I shall stand by you." After those words, a wildness rose in the dragon again, and drove it to attack, heaving up fire, hunting for enemies, the humans it loathed. Flames lapped the shield, charred it to the boss, and the body armour on the young warrior was useless to him. But Wiglaf did well under the wide rim Beowulf shared with him, once his own had shattered in sparks and ashes. Inspired again by the thought of glory, the war king threw his whole strength behind a sword stroke and connected with the skull. And Nagling snapped. Beowulf's ancient iron-grey sword let him down in the fight. It was never his fortune to be helped in combat by the cutting edge of weapons made of iron. When he wielded a sword, no matter how blooded and hard-edged the blade, his hand was too strong. The stroke he dealt, I have heard, would ruin it. He could reap no advantage. Then the bane of that people, the fire-breathing dragon, was mad to attack for a third time. When a chance came, he caught the hero in a rush of flame and clamped sharp fangs into his neck. Beowulf's body ran wet with his lifeblood. It came welling out. Next thing, they say, the noble son of Weohstan saw the king in danger at his side and displayed his inborn bravery and strength. He left the head alone, but his fighting hand was burned when he came to his kinsman's aid. He lunged at the enemy lower down, so that his decorated sword sank into its belly and the flames grew weaker. Once again the king gathered his strength and drew a stabbing knife he carried on his belt, sharpened for battle. He stuck it deep into the dragon's flank. Beowulf dealt it a deadly wound. They had killed the enemy. Their courage quelled his life. That pair of kinsmen, partners in nobility, had destroyed the foe. So every man should act, be at hand when needed. But now, for the king, this would be the last of his many labours and triumphs in the world. Then the wound dealt by the ground burner earlier began to scald and swell. Beowulf discovered deadly poison suppurating inside him, surges of nausea, and so, in his wisdom, the prince realized his state and proceeded towards a seat on the rampart. He steadied his gaze on those gigantic stones, saw how the earthwork was braced with arches built over columns. And now that Thane, unequalled for goodness, with his own hands washed his lord's wounds, swabbed the weary prince with water, bathed him clean, unbuckled his helmet. Beowulf spoke. In spite of his wounds, mortal wounds, he still spoke, for he well knew his days in the world had been lived out to the end. His allotted time was drawing to a close. Death was very near. Now is the time when I would have wanted to bestow this armour on my own son, had it been my fortune to have fathered an heir and live on in his flesh. For 50 years I ruled this nation. No king of any neighbouring clan would dare face me with troops. None had the power to intimidate me. I stood my ground and took what came, cared for things in my keeping, never fomented quarrels, never swore to a lie. All this consoles me. Go now quickly, dearest Wiglaf, under the grey stone where the dragon is laid out, lost to his treasure. Hurry to feast your eyes on the hoard. Away you go. I want to examine the ancient gold, gaze my fill on those garnered jewels. My going will be easier for having seen the treasure, a less troubled letting go of the life and lordship I have long maintained. And so I have heard the son of Weohstan quickly obeyed the command of his languishing, war-weary lord. He went in his chain mail under the rock-piled roof of the barrow, exulting in his triumph, and saw beyond the seat a treasure trove of astonishing richness, wall hangings that were a wonder to behold, glittering gold spread across the ground, the old dawn-scorching serpent's den packed with goblets and vessels from the past, tarnished and corroding, rusty helmets all eaten away, armbands everywhere, artfully wrought. How easily treasure buried in the ground, gold hidden however skilfully, can escape from any man. And he saw too a standard, entirely of gold, hanging high over the hoard, a masterpiece of filigree. It glowed with light, so he could make out the ground at his feet and inspect the valuables. Of the dragon there was no remaining sign. The sword had dispatched him. The one who had for long minded the hoard, hovering over gold, unleashing fire, surging forth midnight after midnight, had been mown down. Wiglaf went quickly, keen to get back, excited by the treasure. Anxiety weighed on his brave heart. He was hoping he would find the leader of the Geats alive, for he had left him, helpless, earlier, on the open ground. So he came to the place, carrying the treasure, and found his lord bleeding profusely, his life at an end. Again he began to swab his body. The beginnings of an utterance heaved up from the coffers of the king's heart. The old lord gazed sadly at the gold. To the everlasting Lord of all, to the King of glory, I give thanks that I behold this treasure here in front of me, that I have been allowed to leave my people so well endowed on the day I die. Now that I have bartered my last breath to own this fortune, it is up to you to look after their needs. I can hold out no longer. Order my troop to construct a barrow on a headland on the coast, after my pyre has cooled. It will loom on the horizon at Hrone's Ness, and be a reminder among my people, so that in coming times crews under sail will call it Beowulf's barrow, as they steer ships across the wide and shrouded waters. Then the king, in his great-heartedness, unclasped the collar of gold from his neck and gave it to his young thane, telling him to use it and the war-shirt and the gilded helmet. You are the last of us, the only one left of the Wegmundings. Fate swept us away, sent my whole brave, high-born clan to their final doom. Now I must follow. That was the warrior's last word. He had no more to confide. The furious heat of the pyre would assail him. His soul fled from his breast to its destined place among the steadfast ones. It was hard then on the young hero, having to watch the one he held so dear there on the ground, going through his death agony. The dragon from under earth, his nightmarish destroyer, lay destroyed as well, utterly without life. He lay there rigid, brought low beside the treasure lodge. Never again would he glitter and glide and show himself off in the midnight air, exulting in his riches. He fell to earth through the battle strength in Beowulf's arm. The treasure had been won, bought and paid for by Beowulf's death. Both had reached the end of the road through the life they had been lent. Before long the battle-dodgers abandoned the wood, the ones who had let their lord down earlier, the tail-turners, 10 of them together. When he needed them most, they had made off. Now they were ashamed, and came behind shields in their battle outfits to where the old man lay. They watched Wiglaf sitting worn out, a comrade shoulder to shoulder with his lord, trying in vain to bring him round with water. Much as he wanted to, there was no way he could preserve his lord's life on earth, or alter in the least the Almighty's will. What God judged right would rule what happened to every man, as it does to this day. Then a stern rebuke was bound to come from the young warrior to the ones who had been cowards. Wiglaf, son of Weohstan, spoke. He upbraided the battle-dodgers, saying, Beowulf had little cause to brag about his armed guard. Yet God, who ordains who wins or loses, allowed him to strike with his own blade when bravery was needed. I could do little to protect his life in the heat of the fray, yet I found new strength welling up when I went to help him. Then my sword connected, and the deadly assaults of our foe grew weaker, the fire coursed less strongly from his head. But when the worst happened, too few rallied around the prince. So it is goodbye now to all you know and love on your home ground, the open-handedness, the giving of war swords. Every one of you with freeholds of land, our whole nation will be dispossessed once princes from beyond get tidings of how you turned and fled and disgraced yourselves. A warrior will die sooner than live a life of shame. Then he ordered the outcome of the fight to be reported to those camped on the ridge, that crowd of retainers who had sat all morning, sad at heart, shield-bearers, wondering about the man they loved. Would this day be his last, or would he return? He told the truth, and did not balk, the rider who bore news to the cliff-top. He addressed them all. Now the people's pride and love, the Lord of the Geats, is laid on his deathbed, brought down by the dragon's attack. Beside him lies the bane of his life, dead from knife wounds. There was no way Beowulf could manage to get the better of the monster with his sword. Wiglaf sits at Beowulf's side, the son of Weohstan, the living warrior watching by the dead, keeping weary vigil, holding awake for the loved and the loathed. Now war is looming over our nation. Soon it will be known to Franks and Frisians far and wide that the king is gone. Hostility has been great among the Franks since Hygelac sailed forth at the head of a war fleet into Friesland. There the Het Wara harried and attacked and overwhelmed him with great odds. The leader in his war gear was brought low, fell amongst followers. That lord did not favour his company with spoils. The Merovingian king has been an enemy to us ever since. Nor do I expect peace or pact-keeping of any sort from the Swedes. Remember, at Ravenswood, Ungantheow slaughtered Heathkin, Hrethel's son, when the Geat people in their arrogance attacked first the fierce Scilfings. The return blow was quickly struck by Ochtherry's father. Old and terrible, he felled the Sea King. Then he kept hard on the heels of the foe and drove them, leaderless, lucky to get away, in a desperate rout into Ravenswood. So this bad blood between us and the Swedes, this vicious feud, I am convinced, is bound to revive. They will cross our borders and attack in force when they find out that Beowulf is dead. In days gone by, when our warriors fell and we were undefended, he kept our coffers and our kingdom safe. He worked for the people, but as well as that, he behaved like a hero. We must hurry now to take a last look at the king and launch him, lord and lavisher of rings, on the funeral road. His royal pyre will melt no small amount of gold. Heaped there in a hoard, it was bought at heavy cost, and that pile of rings he paid for at the end with his own life will go up with the flame, be furled in fire. Treasure no follower will wear in his memory, nor lovely woman link and attach as a torque around her neck. But often, repeatedly, in the path of exile they shall walk bereft, bowed under woe, now that their leader's laugh is silenced, his spirits quenched. Many a spear, dawn cold to the touch, will be taken down and waved on high. The swept harp won't waken warriors, but the raven, winging darkly over the doomed, will have news, tidings for the eagle of how he hooked and ate, how the wolf and he made short work of the dead. Such was the drift of the dire report that gallant man delivered. He got little wrong in what he told and predicted. The whole troop rose in tears, then took their way to the uncanny scene under Ernaness. There, on the sand, where his soul had left him, they found him at rest, their ring-giver from days gone by. The great man had breathed his last. Beowulf the king had indeed met with a marvellous death. But what they saw first was far stranger. The serpent on the ground, gruesome and vile, lying facing him. The fire dragon was scarcely burnt, scorched all colours. From head to tail, his entire length was 50 feet. He had shimmered forth on the night air once, then winged back down to his den. But death owned him now. He would never enter his earth gallery again. Beside him stood pitchers and piled-up dishes, silent flagons, precious swords eaten through with rust, ranged as they had been while they waited their 1,000 winters underground. That huge cache, gold inherited from an ancient race, was under a spell, which meant no one was ever permitted to enter the ring hall unless God himself, mankind's keeper, true king of triumphs, allowed some person pleasing to him, and in his eyes worthy, to open the hoard. Wiglaf, son of Weohstan, spoke. Often, when one man follows his own will, many are hurt. This happened to us. Nothing we advised could ever convince the Lord we loved, our land's guardian, not to aggravate the keeper of the gold. Let him lie where he was long accustomed, lurk there under earth until the end of the world. He held to his high destiny. The hoard is laid bare, but at a grave cost. It was too cruel a fate that forced the king to that encounter. I have been inside and seen everything amassed in the vault. I managed to enter, although no great welcome awaited me under the earth wall. I quickly gathered up a huge pile of the priceless treasures hand-picked from the hoard and carried them here where the king could see them. He was still himself, alive, aware, and in spite of his weakness he had many requests. He wanted me to greet you and order the building of a barrow that would crown the site of his pyre, serve as his memorial, in a commanding position, since of all men to have lived and thrived and lorded it on earth, his worth and due as a warrior were the greatest. Now let us again go quickly and feast our eyes on that amazing fortune heaped under the wall. I will show the way and bring you close to those coffers packed with rings and bars of gold. Let a bier be made and got ready quickly when we come out, and then let us bring the body of our Lord, the man we loved, to where he will lodge for a long time in the care of the Almighty. Then Weohstan's son, stalwart to the end, had orders given to owners of dwellings, many people of importance in the land, to fetch wood from far and wide for the good man's pyre. Now shall flame consume our leader in battle, the blaze darken round him who stood his ground in the steel hail, when the arrow storm shot from bowstrings pelted the shield wall. The shaft hit home, feather-fledged, it finned the barb in flight. Then the wise son of Weohstan called from among the king's thanes a group of 7. He selected the best and entered with them, the 8th of their number, under the god-cursed roof. One raised a lighted torch and led the way. No lots were cast for who should loot the hoard, for it was obvious to them that every bit of it lay unprotected within the vault, there for the taking. It was no trouble to hurry to work and haul out the priceless store. They pitched the dragon over the cliff top. Let tides flow and backwash take the treasure minder. Then coiled gold was loaded on a cart in great abundance, and the grey-haired leader, the prince on his bier, was borne to Hronesness. The Geat people built a pyre for Beowulf, stacked and decked it until it stood 4 square, hung with helmets, heavy war shields, and shining armour, just as he had ordered. Then his warriors laid him in the middle of it, mourning a lord far famed and beloved. On a height they kindled the hugest of all funeral fires. Fumes of wood smoke billowed darkly up. The blaze roared and drowned out their weeping. Wind died down, and flames wrought havoc in the hot bone house, burning it to the core. They were disconsolate, and wailed aloud for their lord's decease. A Geat woman, too, sang out in grief. With hair bound up, she unburdened herself of her worst fears, a wild litany of nightmare and lament. Her nation invaded, enemies on the rampage, bodies in piles, slavery and abasement. Heaven swallowed the smoke. Then the Geat people began to construct a mound on a headland, high and imposing, a marker that sailors could see from far away, and in 10 days they had done the work. It was their hero's memorial. What remained from the fire they housed inside it, behind a wall as worthy of him as their workmanship could make it. And they buried torques in the barrow, and jewels, and a trove of such things as trespassing men had once dared to drag from the hoard. They let the ground keep that ancestral treasure, gold under gravel, gone to earth, as useless to men now as it ever was. Then 12 warriors rode around the tomb, chieftains' sons, champions in battle, all of them distraught, chanting in dirges, mourning his loss as a man and a king. They extolled his heroic nature and exploits, and gave thanks for his greatness, which was the proper thing, for a man should praise a prince whom he holds dear, and cherish his memory when that moment comes when he has to be convoyed from his bodily home. So the Geat people, his hearth companions, sorrowed for the lord who had been laid low. They said that of all the kings upon the earth, he was the man most gracious and fair-minded, kindest to his people, and keenest to win fame.